Good evening. Today is 25th of September, 2021. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
And welcome to America in Danger. Now, I have to say this. Illegal immigration is simply out of control.
Way out of control.
You know, we've seen Del Rio in the news lately. We've seen the numbers skyrocketing, just astronomically.
Right.
Border Patrol is overwhelmed. But I want to play a game. And
I hate games, but I'll play. I'll play with you.
I've got 3 quotes here.
Okay.
And I'm going to read each quote, and I want you to guess who it might have been.
Well, this isn't fair because I already know, but go ahead.
All right, this quote is from 2005, and it says, "We simply cannot allow people to pour into the United States undetected, undocumented, unchecked, and circumventing the line of people who are waiting patiently, diligently, and lawfully to become immigrants to this country."
Well, surely that was David Duke.
Not quite.
Okay.
That was Barack Obama. Now, that was Barack Obama who said we simply cannot allow illegal immigration to run rampant. Now, here's the next one. This gentleman said illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple. People who enter the United States without permission are illegal aliens, and illegal aliens should not be treated the same as those who enter legally.
Lyndon LaRouche.
Actually, it was Chuck Schumer.
Oh, well, not Lyndon LaRouche.
Chuck Schumer. Now, here's the third one.
All right.
2006 said, "Let me tell you something, folks. People are driving across the border with tons, hear me, tons of everything from byproducts, from methamphetamine to cocaine to heroin. It's all coming up through Mexico, corrupt Mexico."
Well, I think that was me.
Yeah, I've said that a time or two myself, but no, that was Joseph Biden, the 47-year career politician who has never produced anything other than laws that penalize the little people.
Yeah, he's just a sock puppet for the left right now.
Exactly.
And 100% a figurehead at this point.
Exactly.
Really at all points, but especially at this point.
Yeah. You know, at that time, and it's interesting because, I've read this in several articles, and I believe the same thing before I ever read those articles. But the Democrats in those years were so sure that they were orchestrating an environment where voter fraud and cheating would be so controllable that they didn't have to worry about the numbers of voters out there.
Well, that, and I think they thought they could sell their ideas to people. I mean, largely what we're observing is a concerted effort on the part of the left, which is synonymous with Democrats at this point, to re-engineer and rejigger the population of this country because they have not heretofore been able to achieve the 51+% they need in voters for their program. For their program of essentially, Western European style socialism or worse.
Or worse.
Or worse. And so now they've just decided, well, we're just going to re-engineer the demographics of the country. And they're doing it with the cooperation of big business, big tech, academia, all the institutions, media. It's really unprecedented, and it's unfortunately they're getting away with it because nobody's doing anything.
They are. I think it was up until the shocking defeat of Hillary Clinton in 2016. The Democrats came to realize that the amount of voter fraud necessary to control these elections, they were a little shy on that.
I think that caught them by surprise. That's right. They didn't quite engineer. They didn't quite manipulate the election enough because really, I think. People on the right have always assumed that, well, there's voter fraud that goes on in a big way on the left, but it's never quite enough. I mean, in other words, we have to win big in order to win. Okay, and I think they, with respect to the 2016 election of Donald Trump, I think they looked at the landscape and I think they deluded themselves. They thought, well, nobody's going to vote for this guy, and we've got this all sewed up, and everybody loves Hillary. She's just the smartest woman in the world, and how could nobody would possibly vote for this ham-fisted, unsophisticated, orange-haired buffoon. That's what they thought. And much to everybody's surprise, You know, a lot of folks, especially in those Rust Belt states in Michigan and Ohio. And I think his vote, I think he got more votes, you know, or a higher proportion of votes than we even acknowledge now for that, or are formally acknowledged for that election.
Right.
You know, they just couldn't. They got caught by surprise, and they just couldn't engineer. You know, and if you go and look at if you look at the 2018 midterms, think about Florida. I don't know if anybody, you know, because right now everybody's looking at Ron DeSantis as sort of a possible backup world for Trump, or as at least a stand-in for him and his policies as a traditional politician anyway. Well, you know, it was almost Andrew Gillum.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was very close.
And I don't know if you remember all the holdup and the shenanigans and all the things that were going down there. There was one of their election officials down there. Her name was something Sykes. She was a white-haired woman who they locked the doors, and they sat there and they kept counting and counting. They were doing everything they could. And I think all of what happened, and California too, in the 28 midterms, you know, they gained a lot of seats after the fact, right? It was all through ballot harvesting, all the things that we now understand well to be tools of election fraud and theft.
Absolutely.
And that's what they did. And they've worked out those systems. They're refining them. I don't see any reason to believe it's going to be any different going forward. So I hope people are paying close attention, because I don't think the 2022 midterms are going to be some kind of savior event for us.
No, nor do I. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a Democrat sweep in the midterms simply because of the cheating mechanism.
Yeah, that they put in place.
You know, I think one byproduct of the 2016 election outcome was that the Democrats, prior to that, as evidenced by these quotes from Schumer, Obama, and Joe Biden, they didn't recognize the illegal immigrants as potential Democrat voters. I think 2016, they had a shift in the lens there, and they began to realize that, well, you know what? We're going to bring them in just carte blanche.
I mean, it's largely not a point worth arguing too much, but I don't think that's true. I think they did. I think they'd simply, at the time, because the election rules were such that they had to kind of win somewhat honestly. I mean, they couldn't just perpetrate outright fraud like they've done in these last couple cycles. They had to at least appeal nominally to people's sentiments, and even nominal, normal blue collar, again, Rust Belt Democrats, the old blue dog Democrats, they're not for this unbridled illegal immigration. They're not for that. So they had to at least pay lip service to that.
Right.
But I think they've always been on board with bringing as many of those people. I mean, what do you think the whole amnesty thing was about back in 05, 06 time frame?
Well, this is true.
Look at what they've done to California. California is the model for what they want to do to the rest of the country. And Reagan got snookered with a big amnesty back in '86. They completely amnestized all the illegals in California. They've turned that into a one-party state where ballot harvesting is legal.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Mail-in voting is the norm.
Yeah.
Okay. So California's never coming back. At least not anytime in our lifetime, or probably anybody who's watching or who is who is alive today in their lifetime.
Right.
Okay. And so they're institutionalized. They're instituting and codifying these mechanisms as best they can around the country. And
they are. They are. And with the with the previous election, or when Mr. Biden went in, I think that they just took the gloves off and said, we don't care anymore what people think or what people know. We're going to bring these people in. We're going to let them in regardless. We're going to usher them in. In fact, what have we got? We're on tap for 2.2 million this year.
Right, this
and
year.
That's just the ones they know about.
Right, that's right.
The ones they know about.
And this will fundamentally change the face and nature of this. Again, I take you to California. If anybody that's ever spent any time out there, it was a different place in the late 70s and early 80s than it is now. It's borderline unrecognizable now.
Yeah.
Okay, it really is. And everybody I know that lives there, and I know a few people, they're all itching to leave.
I know. I've talked to a few people out that way too.
Right.
They hate it.
Frankly, those policies have ruined what was arguably the best state in the union overall. Largest economy, rich in resources, great weather, massive amounts of technological industry. I think they represented the 7th largest or 8th largest economy in the world if you count it as a separate economy. They're in the process and have destroyed that state. Virtually.
They absolutely have, and secured that with the election of Gavin Newsom in the recall.
Well, that's right, and he didn't. And Larry Elder, who ran against him as a Republican, would have been the first black governor of California, okay, in history. And of course, he was abused racially in many ways throughout his campaign. It's a very hypocritical and one-way street with these people.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but he didn't have a chance.
No.
Because there again, and we're calling these mechanisms fraud. They are essentially, voting rules that make it very easy for them to generate votes and to get people to the polls that have no business being at the polls, or to get their votes and ballot harvest.
Let's talk about ballot harvesting a little bit, because a lot of people, I don't think, understand what the ramifications are there. Ballot harvesting is when someone knocks at your door and they say, are you going to vote? And you say, well, maybe. And they say, well, look, we have absentee ballots here. If you'll just sign here, we'll fill it in for you, or we'll help you fill it in. And we're going to take this and we're going to go. Now, if you sit down and you fill it in straight Republican, then they go out and they throw it in the garbage.
That's right.
If you're incapacitated, don't know who to vote for, they're going to point out every leftist on the ballot and then go take that.
Or they simply go and ballot harvest in areas where they know where they can probably get the votes they want.
Exactly. Where the people don't have a clue.
That's right.
Couldn't name the vice president, couldn't name the secretary of state, couldn't name the secretary of defense.
But they just say, well, if you vote for this person, you're more likely to get these benefits and to get these things that you rely on so much.
And that's what ballot harvesting
That's
is.
correct, right.
Now, I know CNN, I haven't watched CNN because I can only take CNN in 30-second clips there because it's just so disgusting.
But
I'm sure that CNN has just headlines and crawls that the border crisis has been resolved because the illegal immigrant camp at Del Rio has been cleared.
Right.
Now, it's mighty interesting. We had, 18,000 people there a week ago?
Yeah, in Del Rio.
And now it's cleared. Well, let me give you some numbers on that.
Okay.
All right. There have been 30,000 illegals come into Del Rio since September 9th.
Right. Now let's make a point. I mean, that town of Del Rio it's a small Texas town of 35,000 people. It really doesn't even have the population of Rocky Mount.
Yeah. So 12,400 have been released into the U.S. Now, they've been loaded up on buses, taken to the airport, shipped around the U.S. Now, bear in mind, these people are unvaccinated. So how does that sit with the whole vaccination mandates that have gone out? I don't know about you, but that kind of ticks me off.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me if your objective is to squash business and impose authoritarian rules on American citizens while continuing to adulterate the population with illegal immigrants and continue to seed the various parts of the country with coronavirus positive individuals.
That's exactly right.
So you can continue this pandemic. That's what's going on, in my opinion.
The COVID pandemic was really winding down until the Biden administration decided to start taking these people from the border and just shipping them all by military aircraft all across the U.S. And all of a sudden we see spikes.
Right.
We see more cases. We see more mandates. We see draconian regulations coming back, or mandates coming back into play. And you can't tell me that hasn't spurred the number of cases across the country.
Yeah, and I think the objective is to keep some kind of scamdemic effort alive through the next election cycle.
It absolutely is. And if you notice, if you look into the numbers on that, you see that the death rates are down, and of course they're trying to, create hysteria, talking about the emergency rooms are packed and this and the other. But the reality is, the cases now, there may be a lot of cases, but the severity is much lower than it originally was.
That's correct.
But they still try and terrorize us now. That's not to say that people aren't dying from it, because they are. We all know that.
Yeah.
Only idiots think that nobody's dying from it and that everything is made up. But we know that.
But these are people who all have, for the most part, look, 78% of hospitalizations are among the obese.
Yeah,
for COVID.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right there, I mean, I guess my point is, we knew in the beginning, but we particularly know now who the vulnerable members of the population are. Okay, so we need to focus our efforts on helping them avoid infection.
Exactly.
Okay. But most, working age healthy people have nothing to be concerned about any more than they would during a normal flu season. And
That's right.
In my estimation, based on the
That's right.
numbers.
And yet there are those out there who say, oh, so-and-so was 24 years old and he died. Well, if you look at the flu, it has the same pattern. It takes
right.
people that you wouldn't expect occasionally. People die. But back to the immigration thing, 8,000 from the 30,000 in Del Rio returned to Mexico voluntarily.
Okay.
I guess those are the ones that got whipped.
Right.
The Border Patrol was whipping.
Yeah.
5,000 are currently in processing.
Yeah, which means they're going to be in the interior of the
It means
U.S.
they're being put on buses and aircraft,
right.
and they bust them to an airport, so they're probably waiting for a flight.
Yeah.
Now, out of 30,000 plus, only 2,000 were deported.
Right.
Out of 30,000, only 2,000 were deported. Now, there was a mandate back after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And it took, it was about 5 years later, I believe, or 4 years later. But they passed a law that said DHS is beholden to secure the borders.
Mm-hmm.
Land, sea. And what have they done?
Well, apparently not much.
Not
in,
much.
In regard
That's
to that.
exactly right. Not much. I
Well,
can't remember what the name of that was. Let me see if I can find the name of that.
Right. Well, while you do that, I mean, I think the thing to point out is that the overarch here is that there's truly a globalist objective here.
Oh, absolutely.
And the globalist objective is to erase borders. They don't want borders.
Well,
and
that's right.
And they especially don't want borders for the United States, because the United States has stood in the way, up to now anyway. They stood in the way of this globalist sort of one world viewpoint or outlook or objective, I guess I'll say.
Yep.
And until they can water down the United States in terms of its productivity and its military power and its independence, okay, and its concept of individual liberty and rights as enshrined in the Constitution, and that's part of their objective is to destroy the Constitution. Until they do those things, they can't really have this world order,
right?
Which is more in keeping with the China model and the way they conduct and the way they orchestrate and conduct their society. Rather than this one historically, or Western civilization in general. So this is an assault on Western civilization in general, and an assault on the United States in particular.
It is.
Okay, and unfortunately, I'm afraid, based on observations, I think we just had too many generations of people in this country who've had it very good and comfortable, and people don't want to lose their cushy jobs and their little comfortable situations. And
that's right. They say complacency is the biggest threat to a republic.
Well, that's right.
Complacency and comfort. Comfort.
That's right.
Yes, in 2006, now this was bipartisan. It was called the Secure Fence Act.
Okay.
That directed the Department of Homeland Security to take appropriate action to achieve operational control over U.S. land and maritime borders to prevent unlawful entry. Now, that sounds like a pretty simple mission statement.
Clear-cut mission statement.
Clear-cut.
Absolutely.
Clear-cut mission statement. And, we currently have a Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Mayorkas, who had the audacity at a congressional hearing to say, when questioned about whether he felt the border was secure or not, to say, yes, I believe it is secure. And we're on tap for 2.2 million illegal aliens to come into the country this year. What fantasy world is that man living in?
Right. Well, I mean, he's just saying whatever he. First of all, again, nobody's going to challenge him. These folks have the mainstream media 100% carrying water for them.
Exactly.
I mean, the mainstream media, and by that I mean CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, to some extent even Fox News.
I was going to throw that in there.
Right. All of these people are basically the propaganda wing for this movement.
Exactly.
For this re-engineering of America, this movement to re-engineer this country.
And what's interesting is we don't even have a Ministry of Truth. We don't have a propaganda chief. We don't have a cabinet level Department of Truth and propaganda.
Right.
So the media just steps right in the line.
They act in that role.
They act in that role. They get a few calls. They get a few leaks. Well, I'm going to tell you,
Well, they have wholly destroyed their credibility.
They have.
Even with people who are sort of down with that direction, they know that 9/10 of what comes out of those organs is utter and complete, baloney. Nonsense. Yeah,
Nonsense.
made up, subject to be completely made up out of whole cloth.
Absolutely.
Where'd you get that? Well, I saw it on Twitter.
Yeah.
And then I reported it on the news.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, somebody called me and somebody tweeted this to me, and that's the story.
Well, they're all the time doing stories that turn out to be completely false.
Oh, yeah.
And
Here's a perfect example: the whipping of the
Right.
immigrants at the border.
Right.
Oh my God, they were whipping it. Who'd we see? Maxine Waters, Chuck Schumer, the DHS head, Mayorkas, and just a host of others. And CNN was running crawls, Border Patrol whipping migrants at the border. This is harkens back to slavery.
Well, I mean, Maxine Waters, if there were an example of, or proof of the old adage, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, it's got to be she, because her district, her district has to be collectively the lowest IQ district because for her to look like somebody that's worthy of a vote of any kind, to be a representative in Congress, they must be plain old low IQ stupid people to elect that woman. She is dumb. She is just dumb.
Well, there are numerous ones that qualify as that.
Well, there are, but somehow
from Hawaii. AOC.
Well, Sheila Jackson Lee.
Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, and
there's a host of them.
Oh, and what about
what's the Kentucky Fried Chicken guy's name?
Oh, that guy from Tennessee. I don't remember his name. And then there's Hank Johnson.
Hank Johnson,
of Guam tipping over fame. We really need to play that clip sometime.
I'll look that up.
Yeah.
I'll find that. And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the undermining of the U.S., the strategy to undermine this country. So you won't want to miss that. So stay tuned for more America in Danger. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is John Woodruff with Premier Equipment Company of Rocky Mountain Infield. Been shopping for a zero-turn mower lately. You've probably noticed that inventory is getting hard to come by. So come on down and see what we've got. We've got a showroom full. We have a showroom full of Exmark and Grasshopper zero-turn mowers. Everything from commercial to residential, everything in between. We've got a good relationship with our distributors. They tell us when we sell these, they've got more on the way. If you've been in the market for a zero-turn mower, come see me, John Woodruff from Premier Equipment.
Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
All right, we're back, and we're going to talk a little bit about the strategy to undermine America.
Right.
And, these strategies are not new.
Nope.
They're common throughout history, and they are always orchestrated with pressure from above and pressure from below. Right. And what I mean by that is you'll have pressure on a global scale, on a national scale. The government, large corporations, entities such as that, the United Nations. That's pressure from above. And then you have pressure from below, which is what they have convinced the people to demand.
Right.
Much like in the French Revolution, where the public was calling off with their heads.
Yeah, right.
So that's
Mob
pressure.
rule.
Mob rule.
Yeah.
That's pressure from above, pressure from below. And, we see that with the orchestration of the riots, the past riots. Those were encouraged, those were facilitated, those were instigated in some cases. And that's pressure from below. And it's, it's when they show tragic events on the news. They pick one thing out and show a tragic event on the news, and everyone thinks that's the norm. That's what's going on everywhere.
Right, something anecdotal.
Anecdotal that just happens to be something they can use as an emotional ploy. That's the pressure from below.
Right.
From below. Now, here's some pressure from above. The IMF is suggesting that credit scores could soon be based on web browsing.
Yeah, I saw that.
Now, everyone should pretty much know that you have a credit score.
Right.
Now, the one most commonly used is the FICO score.
Right.
FICO, there are 3 agencies that report that. You can go to mycreditreport.com, and there's Credit Karma and all these to get your credit scores, to see what it is, to track it.
Yep.
And in the past, credit scores have been based on your ability to pay your bills.
Your history of paying your bills. That's the main thing. Your history of paying your bills. Do you pay your bills? Do you pay?
That's
when
right.
you borrow money, do you pay it back? It's a very simple metric, folks. I mean, it's just, it's not based on anything other than you borrowed some money from somebody, you didn't pay it back. Guess what? Your credit score is not so high.
On your credit score. That's right. Everybody's heard of you don't have enough credit to get credit.
Right.
And that's true, because you don't have a history. So you typically start out small.
Right.
And build that credit history over time, saying, yes, I am responsible and I pay my bills.
That's right.
Well, now the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, if you don't understand that, and of course this is an international agency.
Yeah, a big globalist agency.
Big
One
globalist
of these things that was established, I don't know, back in the 60s or 70s.
Yep. And they've determined that, we need to study everyone's browsing history.
Right. Web browsing
history. And determine their credit score. Well, this is not simply a credit score.
Right.
What they're not saying is that this will be rolled in with the social score.
That's right.
Just like China's doing right now. If you browse things like guns and liberty and Constitution and things of that nature, well, your score is going to go down.
Or put you in a category that might make you less creditworthy.
Exactly, less creditworthy. And they know that as we move toward a more controlled currency, a currency-less society, a moneyless society,
digitized
cashless
currency.
society, digitized currency. They know that when you go put your card in to check your credits, there won't be any, because they'll simply take them away if your social score goes low enough, and that's what they do in China.
That's right.
You're prohibited from going to certain restaurants. You're prohibited from buying certain things. It's all controlled. It's a very dystopian picture.
It is, because and part of what they do with the Chinese social credit score, I mean, they grade you on things like just being rude or being not leaving a good tip. Okay, those are all things that are lamentable, but when you start saying we're going to micromanage every individual. And who are the people doing the micromanaging and determining these things?
That's the question.
Folks somehow have this deluded notion that government bureaucracies and these people in big tech and all that, somehow they're these benevolent, omniscient entities who are the arbiters of good and proper perspectives and behavior, and we're going to let them sit in judgment of the peons. And as they go about their daily lives, we're going to control them through this technology. And I really think part of what's happened is that the technology has reached a level where these people are so excited at the prospect of being able to use it, because finally they've got the tools they need to micromanage everybody's life right down to their daily behavior in their own little environs. And this credit score thing is a first step. I mean, what they claim is that, this is to help people who don't have a traditional credit score. We're going to use these browsing habits to get an idea of whether they're likely to be a good credit risk. Well, you know what? Whatever. What we really want to do is sweep up and vacuum up lots of data about people.
Lots of data, that's right.
And then use it later to make judgments about them.
Exactly.
All right, and it'll all be pitched as some kind of benign thing right now, but it'll be just like the NSA and just like the Patriot Act. All of a sudden, these things will turn into these very malevolent entities and these bureaucracies that cannot be unwound.
Right.
Okay, and it's just more dystopian authoritarianism and micromanaging of people's lives.
Yeah, it's just like the secret FISA courts.
Exactly. Well,
Secret
that's
FISA
right.
court.
Which were born out of the Patriot Act.
It needs to be secret because we can't have these judges exposed to anyone knowing that they've issued these warrants for these foreign terrorists.
Right,
And they've got to be beyond reproach.
Right.
And they've got to be non-political, so it's got to be secret.
Right.
Well, what did we get out of that?
A star chamber, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got investigation of American citizens, surveillance
Right.
of American citizens who had not committed any crime.
Right.
Just
And
for political reasons.
right, and manipulation of those FISA courts and FISA warrants to spy on the Donald Trump campaign and his presidency.
Absolutely.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
what was done there, and everybody knows it.
Everybody knows it. CNN won't admit it, but they know it too. They know it too. Now, another, and this really goes with the woke environment, which is instigated pressure, and that blends into pressure from above and below.
Right.
As how that one works. That kind of covers both areas. But the National Archives, now the National Archives keeps all the documents of the United States.
Yeah, founding documents.
Everything. Everything. They have millions of documents
Right.
there that have historic value.
Okay.
So what they've done is they've assigned trigger warnings, carte blanche to everything, including the founding documents.
This one says to be through the roof. I'm barely even
Yeah.
listening to you talk because it just makes me so mad to actually hear the details.
They say that there is harmful language
And
in
content.
the founding documents.
Yeah.
They go on to say in a 105-page report issued by the task force in 2021, and this was the task force on racism in the National Archives. Now,
Right.
why the National Archives has a task force on racism,
Well,
I do not know.
their
because
job is to preserve
they're
these
librarians.
documents. Yeah, their
They're
job is to
librarians.
preserve these
That's
documents.
their only commandment. They are librarians. They said that the United States is full of structural racism, including a rotunda in our flagship building that lauds wealthy white men in our nation's founding while marginalizing BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, and other communities. Now, the director of the National Archives is David Ferrario, and he's determined that, the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, those are offensive.
Well, there are a couple of things that caught my eye, too, in that very same article. And, it says they want to create a more inclusive and historically accurate tribute to the nation's founding. Its Reimagine the Rotunda plan includes contemporary views, let me emphasize that, contemporary views on the men who framed the founding documents and their participation in and positions on slavery, new sculptures, and a recontextualizing of the murals now in the Rotunda. Well, look, we've got no business imposing contemporary views on the men who created this republic 250 plus years ago. They were the ones that were forward looking in creating a document that were the seeds of the liberty and the freedom that everybody enjoys today.
Exactly.
Nobody is being, none of these people, I assume, are that smart, or they're extremely evil, because anybody who looks at this would know, who studied this history would know that they were very forward thinking, okay? And that to judge them by today's standards is absurd.
Absolutely.
In a couple hundred years, there'll be no more animal husbandry, I'm fairly convinced. Are we going to judge everybody that does anything good today by the fact that, they ate real meat, they ate slaughtered animals, they're evil? Is that the model?
If we continue on this path.
That's correct. That's how that will work.
Yeah, they go on to say that slurs should be purged and recontextualized, and these are words such as crippled, elderly, handicapped, slave, Eskimo. Now, that's absolutely outrageous.
Right.
Outrageous. You're going to rewrite history. They're actually calling for a rewrite
That's right.
of history.
Even more disturbing, and that's actually a quote, even more disturbingly, the archives says, quote, white supremacy culture is the dominant, unquestioned standards of behavior and ways of functioning embodied by the vast majority of institutions of the United States. These standards may be seen as mainstream dominant culture practice. They have evolved from the United States history of white supremacy. Okay. So basically what they're saying is that they don't like the founding documents, and they're going to do things to undermine, okay, those the very founding documents that we rely on to guide us in this country, that we and that are the law of the land.
They're going to revise those with contemporary standards. Well, let me tell you something. In this whole undermining of America, what they have done, and this is something that the communists have done throughout history.
Right.
Back all the way before the French Revolution, when the communists were there, they weren't called communists. But what they've done is they have conditioned Americans and people all around the world to not be able to recognize normal.
Yes.
To accept things that are abnormal, that are aberrant, that are just distortions, deviant.
Well, and you read what revolutionaries write. That's the first thing to do is to destroy the culture, destroy the nuclear family, destroy the concept of normal behavior, of what's acceptable, what isn't. And of course, to build the new, you got to destroy the old, and they're hard at work doing that.
Yeah, they absolutely are, and that's what's going on in this country. We see more things coming about, and we have AOC in Washington. Now, everyone should be aware that she attended a Met Gala.
Right.
In a very expensive dress that
Chick-fil-A bag.
It looked like a Chick-fil-A bag, yes it did. That said, tax the rich on the back.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a little I guess it's a tweet or whatever it was, an image, and if you'll put up the image of AOC and the dress. Now look at this. I want you to look at this. Okay, this is AOC and the designer.
The dress designer.
The dress designer.
Yeah.
Now the dress designer owes $103,220 in back taxes.
Okay.
She received $41,666 in the PPP grant,
payroll protection program
that they gave out. Has legions of unpaid interns. So talk about
slave labor.
Slave labor, yeah. Maybe so. She owes $62,722 in workers' comp. So she effectively has no workers' comp because if you owe that much, they cut your policy off now. So she's operating illegally. And buys a table at the Met for $250,000.
Right, got the cash to do that, but not pay her obligations.
Exactly. All right, Lee, thanks. But it goes without saying. Well, these people are hypocrites.
And I tell you, a large portion of them are just plain old thieves.
Yeah, thieves.
They're just con artists, grifters, and thieves who think they have a right to the productive output of other people.
Absolutely do.
Okay, they can't do it themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay, and they're fundamentally dishonest when it comes to meeting their obligations. They never are very good stewards. And look, it's even coming to pass. It's even coming out that Joe Biden himself may owe $500,000 in back taxes.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah.
Let's see his tax return.
That's right. Where's his tax return?
Yeah, I thought he was going to release
I
his tax return.
I thought that was the standard. Yeah, right.
Evidently not. I don't think anyone's asking.
Nah, well, geez, there's a surprise.
Isn't there? We have another individual on the national level, Leon Panetta.
Right.
All right. Leon Panetta, everybody's heard Panetta's name.
Right.
He's been around forever. He's another swamp creature.
Right, I was going to say, he is an archetypal swamp creature. Born and bred of the DC swamp culture. He is an element, and he was always sort of characterized, even though he's a leftist, he always sort of, gets a little bit of street cred with the Republicans. He's respectable, and he was a moderate in the Clinton administration.
Right.
Oh, he's a big leftist is what he is, just like the rest of them.
Absolutely is. Now, Leon Panetta is well aware of the calls that were made by General Milley to his communist Chinese counterpart.
Right.
To assure him that they weren't going to attack him, and if anything happened, he would warn them, which to me is
overt treason. Overt treason.
Yeah. Now, I've got a video clip on this, and Lee, if you'll run this Panetta video clip, it's about 1:20 seconds. So take a look at this and listen to what the man says and who he implicates.
Okay.
So Lee, if you'll run that clip for me.
I mean, obviously, the first call was done pursuant to the approval of Secretary Esper, and I think that that certainly makes that clear as to what General Milley was doing. On the second call, it was obvious at that point that the president was appointing, political people to key positions at the Defense Department. And it was coming at a time when there was a tremendous amount of concern about the role of the military. As you'll recall, every Secretary of Defense signed a letter that indicated that it was very important that the military not be used for political purposes. And we were concerned about what the president might do.
We were concerned.
We were concerned, yeah.
Sounds complicit to me
It absolutely
in those calls.
does. Now, Defense Secretary Esper knew of this, that Milley was making these calls.
Right.
Now, Panetta goes on to say that all of the former Secretary of Defenses wrote a letter that they were concerned, that we were concerned. Well, concerned with what?
Well, first of all, what's all that nonsense about appointing political, about politicizing the military? There is no more politicized military than what we have right now. I mean,
Exactly.
General Milley is spending all of his time focusing on critical race theory and white rage to the exclusion of all else, including his responsibility to evacuate and get out of Afghanistan in a reasonable way, and completely. And again, I think that was all orchestrated on purpose. I think they got the exact result they wanted. I mean, that's a whole other angle on this immigration thing. They're going to be resettling Afghan refugees by the tens of thousands all over.
And they've just increased that quota.
Right, they've already started doing that.
Quota, which, China and Russia wanted Bagram gone because it was so close to their territory.
Right, now they're going to own it.
Now they're going to own it.
Right, one of them will anyway.
And with that, we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about saving the Republic and what we can do.
All right.
So stay tuned for more America in Danger.
This is Nicholas Bellamy at Premier Equipment. I'm going to talk about the 4540 Mahindra. It's 38 horsepower, full cylinder engine. The weight of this tractor is 4,000 pounds. This tractor is perfect for bush hogging, distance, small garden, a hunting club tractor. Comes with a 7-year warranty, 2-year bumper to bumper, additional 5-year on the powertrain. You can have this tractor for $200 a month, and we have 20 of these tractors in stock. Premier Equipment is open during the week from 8 to 5:30 and on the weekends from 8 to 12.
Are you afraid to answer the phone because of bill collectors? A Chapter 13 plan can help. Chapter 13 allows people with too many bills to work out a debt repayment plan under federal law. It helps you control your debts instead of your debts controlling you. Chapter 13 stops creditors from harassing you and stops repossessions and foreclosures. It allows you to answer the phone again without fear or worry. Call H. Frank Allen, Attorney at Law, a debt relief agency providing bankruptcy relief under the Bankruptcy Code.
We're back on America in Danger. Thanks for tuning in. Now, we're talking about saving the Republic.
Okay.
Now, that's a tall order right now.
Seems daunting.
Seems daunting. The first thing you can do is turn off the woke NFL, NBA,
Right.
These idiotic shows, these idiotic sports that are obviously part of the strategy to destroy this nation.
That's right. To destroy the culture of this country.
Break that link.
Yeah.
Break it. I haven't watched.
Yeah.
I won't even watch highlights from the NFL or the NBA.
Right.
They're all in bed with China. They're all in bed with this woke movement. So just break that tie.
Yeah. I wish I actually liked that stuff so I could boycott it, but I've always boycotted it because I never cared about it.
So turn off that TV and educate yourself.
Right.
And sometimes it's tough to educate yourself. If you're going to CNN or you're going to Snopes or you're going to Yahoo or any of these others, you're not educating yourself. I can tell you that much.
You're not.
You really need to be looking at some outside sources for information. And I'm not talking about these conspiracy websites.
Right.
Don't go down the rabbit hole. Don't be drawn into that. Don't get into the 9/11 conspiracy thing.
Right. The QAnon stuff and all that. Yeah.
Don't buy into that garbage.
Right.
Because that's exactly what it is. But what you need to do, you need to look at some things that are facts.
That's right.
That are indisputable facts. And I've got two right here that I want to show you.
Okay.
One is the murder rate in this country. And that indicates that law enforcement has been harmed. Mm-hmm. And we see it right here. The murder rate has increased, 30-some% this year?
Well, this is right. This is from what, 1960 through
2020.
Through 2020. All right. Now, anybody that can make it just even a superficial judgment of graphical representations of data will see that, you've had some years where it's gone up some years where it's gone down some. But here in this last year, it has gone up, what, 30%?
30%.
Okay.
Yep.
Over the baseline, that is unprecedented. And I'm sorry, what did we do? We completely denuded and defunded the police all last year, and we allowed criminal communist thugs to run rampant through our cities and burn them down. Okay? And we've not been enforcing the law, and we have completely abandoned any kind of policing. So the murder rate's gone up. Duh.
Exactly.
Which is why I know this stuff is on purpose, because even Lori Lightfoot, that peculiar looking mayor of Chicago, okay, looks like she was the inspiration for some kind of an alien, creature on Star Trek: The Next Generation or something. She cannot be so stupid as to not recognize that defunding the police will produce this effect. And the murder rate in Chicago is unbelievable. The number of people that get killed on a weekly basis, okay, is just, I don't know, I don't have words for it. Scandalous, whatever.
It's scandalous. It's scandalous. All right, that's one fact.
All right.
And as you said, you described it perfectly. This indicates an agenda. An intentional outcome.
That's right.
And this other one, the Israel versus Sweden, as far as the COVID cases. Now, look at this.
Study this.
Because Israel is probably the most vaccinated nation on earth.
Israel and maybe England.
Maybe England, yeah. All right. Sweden did nothing.
Right.
They didn't mandate anything.
They just said, be careful.
They said, be careful. They didn't lock their economies down. They didn't close businesses. They didn't arrest people. They didn't demand you wear a mask. All right. And if you look, Sweden's
had a better result.
They've got a really good outcome right now. Look at where Israel is on the right side of that chart.
With a bullet.
Cases in Israel are skyrocketed.
Right.
And that's with a vaccine.
Right.
Sweden didn't really do a whole lot, and look at where they are.
That's right.
And that's part of the herd immunity phenomenon.
That's right. That's right.
And, our government, our media, our corporations have all bought into the hysteria.
Well, we're being gaslighted, folks.
We're being gaslighted.
Yeah.
This is fact. This is not conspiracy. This is not conjecture. This is fact. This is two comparable nations. One did everything they could do. The other did virtually nothing.
Right.
That's the outcome. This is part of the education that you need to do for yourself.
Right. Look at the actual data.
Look at the actual data.
Right. And maybe just consider that when the entire herd is running in one direction, maybe that's not where you want to go.
Well,
I mean, the wisdom of the crowd is sometimes an oxymoron.
Well, that's right.
Often it is.
It is, because we know that mob rule is a demeaning term.
That's correct.
I mean, it's not mob wisdom.
That's right.
It's mob rule.
That's
and
right.
Mob
And
mentality.
mob mentality. That's right.
And groupthink and all of these things. Often when the crowd is going one direction, you probably ought to go the other.
Well, I would say, and this is more of a general philosophical point, but I would say people probably always have been, but are very much so now. They're very, very bad at risk assessment.
Absolutely.
They, across the board, they have no ability, partly because they've been made to be scared to death of all kinds of things.
Yeah.
You know, they'll run around town all day looking for a radon detector to detect the radon in their house to protect themselves from something, and they're more likely to be killed driving that vehicle around to the various hardware stores to get their radon detector. I mean,
exactly.
They just, you know,
while people in Italy are going into caves, inhaling deeply.
Exactly.
The benefits of radon.
Well, exactly. That's exactly
those
right.
Those are things you just really back away from. Those
Right. People just can't really judge what is actually a risk, and that I would argue is because they've been purposely dumbed down with respect to their understanding of basic numbers, percentages, fractions, what actual risk represent, what do these numbers mean even, okay? And that works on the very small numbers, and it works with the very big numbers. For example, getting ready to spend $3.5 trillion, which is really more like $5 trillion of money. I don't think people even have a concept of what that number means.
No. I don't either. Now, there are two things that we can hope for. Two things that can be done. One is parents of public school children educate themselves sufficiently to realize that what these children are getting in these public schools is not education. It's indoctrination.
It's indoctrination.
It's nothing less than what the Russians did, what the Chinese did.
That's right.
It's the same thing. You might as well put them in little uniforms and have them all, clicking their heels together.
And there really is something obnoxious about being forced to pay taxes so that your children can be educated to hate the very thing that you probably support.
Exactly. If you're sending your child off to college and they come home and they hate you and what you represent, then they've been indoctrinated.
That's right.
And you know what? The solution to that? Don't send them. Don't put them in these public schools. Homeschool them.
Right.
Right now, we have teachers who are abandoning the public school system, and they're in very great demand for homeschooling.
Right.
And you know what? It is incumbent upon people. Those are your children, people.
Yeah.
You're going to give your children over to the state?
Right. To be educated.
I just have never understood that.
Well, that's right. And increasingly now, the argument for homeschooling, because the public schools are doing such a poor job, you don't have to you don't have to spend a lot of money or do much to do a better job than the public schools. So, I mean, I know a couple of people firsthand who have homeschooled their children using websites, computer programs for the purpose. They make their child spend a couple hours a day on their schoolwork, and those children have a much superior command of English and basic reading and writing and arithmetic, the very things that school is supposed to be teaching children, and they aren't right now, and they haven't been, but they don't get indoctrinated with that stuff. But it's very easy to do better than almost nothing.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about, am I going to be able to do this very important and complicated job? Well, what the public schools are doing is just indoctrinating your children and turning them into little drones, little social justice warrior drones. And frankly, the teaching profession, to me, I hold them really with as much contempt as I do journalism and politicians. And that's the triumvirate. That's the three-legged stool.
Yeah, they've fallen in with the communist-run teachers union.
Yeah.
And they believe that they're great heroes and that they
think they're the heroes, right?
And the thing of it is, I understand there's some great teachers out there. I'm not slamming all teachers.
Yeah.
I know there are some great teachers out there.
Not a lot of great public school teachers, I would say.
Not many.
Yeah, not many
because of the system.
Because of the right.
Because they are relegated to teach certain things, and they cannot deviate from those paths.
Yeah, and frankly, it's a government job.
It's a government job.
Government jobs do not generally cultivate the best and the most accomplished.
No,
they just
they
don't.
Absolutely don't. And the thing of it is, if we had parents that were around, if we had parents like in the 1800s, what they would do when these schools bring the drag queens in for drag queen reading hour.
Drag queen story hour.
Yeah, they would march down to that school and they would drag the drag queen out.
That's right.
And put them on a freight car and tell them don't ever come back here. And they would also drag the principal, the assistant principal,
and there'd be some
the
tar and
teacher.
some feathers involved.
And they would deal
right.
with that.
That's
they would
exactly
get them out
right.
of there. And maybe it's time for some of that.
I think so. I do. I really do.
You know? Now, the second hope that we can hope for, and we're seeing it big time, is government officials are basically inept.
They're inept.
They are inept. The vast majority of them have no qualifications other than they're slightly charismatic and can get elected.
Right, and then maybe they've been through some program in college, which you know makes them
have a piece of paper degree.
Well, I'm an expert in public policy. You know,
Yeah.
In other words, you think you're an expert on how to manipulate the productive resources that other people have generated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the third, and this is not necessarily the best one, but it's a black swan event.
Well, right.
And a black swan event is some catastrophic, unforeseeable event.
Right.
And, you know, in hindsight, you typically say, yeah, that was inevitable.
That was bound to happen.
Can't necessarily be predicted.
see the forest for the trees at the time.
And with all this pressure from above and below, you know, that's pressure being exerted on the working middle class.
That's right.
And you know what? The working middle class is historically been the most independent of all because they don't depend on the government.
That's right.
For their
right.
their welfare checks.
That's right.
And they're not beholden to politicians.
Well, and that's part of it. Also, is why these authoritarians, why they hate small business. Small business people tend to be independent-minded. They don't want to work for some big corporation.
Right.
They generally start their business because they don't want to have a boss, even though they're going to have more pressure and more. You know, I mean,
Even self-employed is not without bosses.
That's
Normally, when you're
correct.
self-employed, you have many bosses.
But it does have a thing that's very important to many people: autonomy.
Absolutely.
And the left hates personal autonomy. They don't even want you to have a car, folks. They want to herd you into mass transit and make it impossible for you. They want to completely eliminate our energy options in this country. They want to control you, and they state as much. This isn't some hyperbolic fantasy, conspiracy nonsense. This is pretty much right out of what they'll tell you the stuff these days.
Now, part of the whole thing about educating yourself is to find sources for this education. Now, I ran across one on WHIG-TV. It's online.
Yeah.
It's not a broadcast channel. It's online, and it's called "The Dark Origins of Communism." Now, these are 10-minute clips, and they go back and discuss the origins when communism wasn't called communism, but it was the same thing. And I've got a trailer I want to close with tonight.
Okay, good.
It's epictv.com, and I highly encourage everyone to watch these.
Yeah, check it out.
This is an educational program that is well worth knowing. This is very simple. It's not difficult to understand. It's very simple, and I'm going to run this trailer as a closing tonight. So we'll see you next week, and Lee, if you'll run that closer. It's been a good show. Enjoyed it. I'm Robert Cressionnie.
I'm John Gatsis.
See you next week.
In every country communism gains power, authoritarianism and death followed in its wake. Communism promises a world without suffering, and yet, in its execution, does the exact opposite. Following Lenin's death, Stalin's 29-year reign killed an estimated 60 to 66 million people. More famines and purges would occur. The very peasants that communism was supposed to benefit instead starved to death under its rule. The party dictates what is right and wrong. Mao ended up killing between 50 million and 70 million people. As an investigative journalist, I want to understand why.